There was zero visibility and a pitch-black sky. The alarm went off, two muffled gunfire rang out, and two guards fell on the ground. For the following 10 minutes, there was constant firing before there was silence. As the building was emptied and prepared for evacuation, a voice crackled over the radio. It was 10 years later that I was watching the sunset from the window of a motel. Recollections flooded back, showing me how it all started and culminated in here. I was lost in contemplation as I took a sip of vodka, the bitter taste representing the agony of recent recollections. I clung to hope anyway, thinking there could yet be a chance for forgiveness. I found out 6 weeks ago, after 11 years of marriage, that my wife Jamie was having an affair. That was the beginning of it all. It was an inadvertent finding, as happens a lot with men who are gullible like me. Logan is my name. Jamie and I dated from our college graduation. She sought employment while I pursued a career in the Marines. Despite my profound affection for her, I felt that it would be unjust to ask her out while we were serving in the military on an indeterminate deployment. After 7 years of service, I returned home and quickly landed a job in a prestigious company's sales department, thanks to my military background. My boss, also a Marine, appreciated the discipline and work ethic veterans bring to the workplace. I excelled at my job and began building a reputation. Eventually, I decided to start dating again and explored several dating sites. To my delight, I found my college sweetheart, Jamie, on one of them. I was pleasantly surprised by how good she looked in her photos. Jamie may not have supermodel looks, but she has an amazing body. In college, she was active in modern dance and always stayed in shape. At 6'4" tone, her legs resembled those of a dancer. Not overly muscular, but beautifully curvy. Her figure was impressive, with long, flowing chestnut hair framing her face with dark brown eyes, and a smile that never ceased to melt my heart. She radiated charm, sweet and innocent, yet with a touch of sensuality. I immediately signed up and contacted her, but it wasn't until a week later that she finally responded, asking why I had been missing for the last 7 years. Her anger at the lack of communication during my time in the Marines suggested she had missed me more than she realized. Our relationship blossomed quickly, moving smoothly from college sweethearts to a dating couple. A year later, we tied the knot, and soon our first child, Rebecca, was born. Our family flourished, and 2 years later, Amy, our second daughter, was born despite my frequent business travels. We moved into a gorgeous home in a charming community with top-notch schools as my work progressed. Even though my profession forced me to travel frequently, up to 2 weeks a month at times, it was necessary for me to develop in my career. A few years later, Jamie began asking when I would travel less, expressing how much she missed my presence and felt more secure when I was home. I assured her that frequent travel was a necessary part of my job, but promised that eventually I would be promoted to a position requiring less travel. Although she accepted my explanation, she still disliked my frequent trips. Looking back, I realized these were signs of an impending problem, but at the time, I was completely in love with my wife and trusted her, ignoring the warning signs. The first sign that something was amiss was our petty arguments when I returned home. She fought over things beyond my control and somehow blamed me, saying, "If you were home more often, this wouldn't happen," or "We need you here and you're traveling all over the country." It took me a while to understand what she was hinting at. The second clue came when I found her new underwear in the laundry basket. While looking for a shirt, I found a pair of silk panties and a matching top. Jamie preferred casual sleepwear, usually opting for a t-shirt and shorts or sweatpants if it was cool. She only ever wore the particular Victoria's Secret item I ever purchased her once, and she never wore it again. Presumably, she bought them for me because I discovered numerous other sets of underpants in her drawers that I had not before noticed. The absence of closeness served as the last hint. She gave an excuse for our lack of passion and romance. That is, she claimed she wasn't in the right frame of mind. I was tired too, so I didn't give it much thought at the moment, figuring that once my travel schedule eased off, everything would get back to normal. I knew that pressing her would not improve the situation, so I held back. I was really hit by the last proof, and at first I didn't want to believe it. Jamie was spotted by a mutual acquaintance at a 30-mile-away farmer's market, holding hands with someone who wasn't me. They kissed, touched, and giggled together. Their friendly banter led our acquaintance to believe the man was me. He discovered she was with someone else when he went to say hello, so he swiftly left to avoid drawing attention to himself. Having a gut feeling that something wasn't right, he decided to follow them briefly until they got into a car and drove away. I vividly remember that phone call. My phone rang just as I finished a meeting. "Hello, Logan." It was Frank. "Hi, Frank. Is it urgent? I'm busy right now and can't talk. Can I call you back later?" I asked with a note of concern. "No, it's okay. Just call me when you can." "It can wait," he replied. After finishing the conversation, I went to the next meeting, not thinking much about it. It wasn't until late at night that I finally called Frank back. "So, Frank, what happened? What was so important that you tried to contact me while I was unavailable?" Frank hesitated before saying, "I don't know how to tell you this, but you should be aware. I ran into your wife the other day, and she wasn't alone." He paused, waiting for my response. "What do you mean? Was she with a friend?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "When I saw them together, I thought it was you with her, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't. They acted like a couple, holding hands, laughing, and even kissing." He explained, "I don't want to break the bad news, Logan, but I think she might be having an affair." Those words made me numb. "Why do you think that? We have a happy marriage." "She has no reason to do that." I couldn't even finish the thought. The evidence I had stumbled upon earlier suddenly made sense, but I still denied it. Frank brought me back to reality. "Logan, I understand that this is difficult to hear, but you need to learn more about this as quickly as possible. It could yet be possible to keep your relationship intact. Tell me if you need anything, please," he said. "Many thanks, Frank. I'll keep you updated," I said, attempting to take it all in. After hanging up the phone, I sat on the bed, pondering whether this was all a cruel joke or something more. The story made more sense to me the more I considered it. Jamie had been distant from me lately while I was home. I was enraged by the idea that she had cheated. I couldn't resist the urge to confront the man who slept with my wife. But during the flight home, I managed to calm down and focus on my next steps. I still lacked concrete evidence of her infidelity and didn't know where to start. As soon as the plane landed, I called Frank to get more details. He confirmed seeing them together, and I couldn't wait to learn more about the man she was with. Keeping our marital problems a secret from my daughters was my main priority. I hoped to save our marriage and family. Frank warned me against impulsive actions, referring to a friend in a similar situation. It would be wise to seek advice on how to handle this. I wouldn't want you to get into trouble or make things worse. Frank's words resonated with me. It became clear I needed to seek advice from someone with similar experiences who could offer valuable insights on confirming or denying my suspicions. The best course of action was to return home and act as if nothing had happened. If Jamie sensed I was up to something, gathering evidence would be more difficult. I hoped my suspicions were unfounded, but the events of that day were still fresh in my memory. When I returned home, I regained my composure to interact normally with Jamie and the girls. It wasn't easy, but I managed. In the following days, I searched the house for any hint of her affair, but found nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling I was missing something important. Frank called about talking to his friend, and I arranged to meet them at a bar across town after work. To keep my investigation confidential, I told Jamie I had late-night appointments scheduled for the week. As I entered the dimly lit bar, I saw Frank and his friend huddled in a secluded booth, sipping beer. Frank introduced his friend Mark, and we exchanged greetings. I sat opposite Frank, noticing their gloomy expressions. Mark, having heard about my predicament from Frank, offered cautionary words based on his experience. He shared how his wife cheated on him with her boss. Despite initial attempts to reconcile, she eventually left. His intense gaze conveyed the bitterness and hostility he felt towards the man who stole his wife. I took revenge on her and her boss, hurting him so he could never hurt women again. But I ended up serving 5 years in prison and losing everything. "Learn from my mistakes and don't do anything rash," he advised. "If you had the chance, would you have acted differently? Would you have tried to reconcile or divorced her immediately?" I asked. I was thinking of confronting her boss covertly to catch him off guard, I added. Mark's tone was bitter and hostile towards the man who took his wife. Knowing what I know now, I would have filed for divorce immediately, he replied. We talked about what needed to be done, like gathering hard proof of Jamie's adultery so I could present it to her and be aware of my legal rights. The second recommendation was to hold a sizable sum of cash in case our accounts were frozen by her upon discovering the truth. Renting a tiny apartment or looking for other housing possibilities in case I had to move out was the fourth piece of advice. Although these were practical ideas, I thought I could talk to Jamie and resolve the situation. When I mentioned this, Mark slammed his fist on the table, reminding me not to do anything stupid. Her new boyfriend is probably filling her head with sweet words about how much he cares for her while her husband is off fooling around. Before confronting your wife, understand what this guy said to her, he advised. Have you ever served in the Army? He asked. Yes, I served in the Marine Corps, I replied, surprised. What do you need before going into battle? Mark inquired. I realized that having solid intelligence about the enemy was essential, so I hesitated a moment before answering. Loud agreement was the answer. It's critical to have trustworthy information in order to understand the issue. Consider this a tactical conflict and make arrangements for any unforeseen issues. Have a plan for the future and be ready to face the consequences. Despite our seeming happiness together, it was difficult for me to accept that my wife might betray me. While expressing his sympathies, Mark noted that problems can arise in even the most solid relationships. Frank was silent for a while before speaking. How are you going to proceed? What steps are you taking to address this situation? He inquired. I was already thinking about something. My main objective was to keep my marriage together, but I also wanted the man who attempted to kidnap my wife to be held accountable so that I wouldn't have to go to jail. Mark laughed at my prison joke, but before I did anything, I needed proof and details on my opponent. Do you have any ideas on how to gather them? I responded. Mark suggested I handle it myself, being observant and patient. He advised against hiring a private investigator, as his past experiences with them were unsuccessful and costly. You have access to her bank accounts, credit card accounts, and phone records. Start there. Look for unusual purchases or phone calls. Check if she has a second mobile phone and collect all the numbers from it. Installing hidden cameras around the house to capture both video and audio could also be beneficial. It's important to catch them in the act, especially if they're using your bed, he said. The thought of her using our bed for this infuriated me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, Mark apologized. I raised my hand to signal it was okay and continued to listen to his advice. After an hour of conversation, I mentally noted Mark's advice. He warned me not to talk to anyone at work until I knew who she was seeing, as it could be someone familiar with my schedule. If I revealed my intentions too soon, it would ruin the game. Mark also suggested a subtle approach to confronting my wife's lover, making me think about how to get back at him. The next day at work, I carefully analyzed my travel plans for the next month. I had 2 business trips planned, one lasting only a couple of days. To avoid raising suspicion, I discussed extending my stay with a client for a whole week with my boss, who supported the idea. Next, I needed to make it look like I was there and then return unnoticed. I bought a return ticket on another airline using a prepaid debit card. I also purchased several spy cameras and a high-quality camera with excellent zoom and low-light capabilities online. This was just the first step in my plan to uncover the identity of the culprit and gather as much information as possible. The next step was to videotape their actions to irrefutably prove her betrayal. Throughout the day, I meticulously planned my strategy. However, the most crucial piece of information was still missing. Who was this mysterious man? Without this knowledge, I couldn't trust anyone, not even my best friend or boss. I knew it would take time to identify him, but I was determined to do so. By the end of the week, all the items I had purchased were delivered to Frank's house. The next step was the strategic installation of spy cameras throughout my house. Fortunately, Jamie and the girls planned to go shopping on Saturday, giving me the opportunity to work without interference. After a few hours, I successfully placed and tested all the cameras. I could even watch the live stream from my tablet or laptop, allowing me to see what was happening at any moment. I started looking around the house for hints after installing the cameras. I looked through her credit card accounts first, searching for any odd spending, and then I went through her wardrobes, focusing on the most recent purchases. I discovered a red dress that was remarkably short, unlike anything I had ever seen her wear, among numerous new things. I found it fascinating, but I couldn't get rid of my possessiveness and wished it was all mine. I looked into it, but I still had no hard proof. I decided to go for a run in order to get my head cleared. I've always found that running helps me think more clearly. When I got home, Jamie's car was in the driveway, indicating that my loved ones were home. I entered the house to the sound of their voices and laughter, which instantly lifted my spirits. I called out, and my girls ran to me with delight to tell me about their day. Jamie came out of the kitchen and asked, "How was your run?" She kissed me on the cheek and gently ushered the girls out of the room. "Everything was fine, but I really need a shower," I said, taking off my shoes. "What's for dinner?" I asked, anticipating a delicious meal. "Pork chops," she replied with a smile. "I hope you're hungry." After a shower and a hearty dinner, we put the girls to bed and settled down in the family room to watch TV. I was lost in thought, wondering what she was doing while I was on the road. My head was spinning, so I decided to go to bed early. In our bedroom, I noticed her purse on the dresser. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to look for answers. To my surprise, I found a cell phone hidden inside that I had never seen before. Without hesitation, I turned it on and quickly noted the number. I also checked the call log and found only one number, which I also wrote down before turning off the phone. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She really was having an affair. I felt empty and full of anger at the person who was involved with her. But I remembered Mark's advice not to do anything rash. I knew I had to bide my time to get my revenge. I quickly changed clothes and went to bed. When Jamie came upstairs, I pretended to be asleep to avoid talking. The days that followed were tough, but even with the revelation of damaging material, I made an effort to behave normally. It was finally time for another work travel. I prepared my belongings for a week-long trip by packing them into my car. As I was leaving, I jokingly said, "Do you have any plans?" I realized that I had never asked this question before after her peculiar reaction. In a hasty attempt to hide my shame, I said, "I thought maybe you and the girls were planning something." With that, I hurriedly said goodbye and drove to the airport, mentally worrying about the cameras I had installed in our house. I hoped she would have the decency to keep him out of our bed, but before this all started, I would have thought she would never cheat on me. Over the next few days, I quickly completed my work with the client and began preparing to return home. In the evenings, I watched the footage from the cameras but didn't notice anything unusual. Curious, I decided to check the notes I had made earlier. The system was set up to start recording when someone entered a room, and all recordings were stored on a device I could access remotely. Reviewing the recordings, I noticed Jamie using her secret mobile phone. Intrigued, I rewound the video to watch her answer the call, then played it back at normal speed. Despite the poor sound quality, I caught fragments of her conversation. "Hey, sweetheart. No, he will not return until the end of this week. You are aware that is not possible. Why not? Because you might be noticed by a neighbor. I'll see you at the motel. Listen." "No," she chuckled. "I won't reveal it." The remainder of the talk was unintelligible as she turned her back on the camera. She added, "Okay, but be careful," as she turned to face the camera once more. "Park at the coffee shop a few blocks away on the next street." "Okay, baby, I can't wait," she continued. "I'll see you tonight on the morrow." I was shocked. That bastard was going to be in my house in our bed. Thoughts of getting rid of him flashed through my mind. But I remembered Mark's warning. Don't do anything stupid. I tried to suppress my anger and bide my time, but the severity of the situation was becoming unbearable. How could my wife, the woman I loved and the mother of our children, betray me like that? What did I do to push her into another man's arms? The flight home went too quickly, and I wasn't mentally prepared for the confrontation. In search of clarity, I checked into a hotel to think about my next steps. I knew he would visit our house that night, and I was determined to meet him face to face. Was he an acquaintance or a colleague? Finding out his identity was crucial. I stood behind the coffee shop where he intended to park, not knowing when he would arrive. Even though I was unaware of his appearance, I took safety measures. I located a parking lot view parking slot at the airport where I hired a car. Equipped with a camera, I experimented with its magnification to obtain his visage and license plate from a minimum of 80 yards away. A silver BMW M5 pulled into the parking lot at about 8 in the evening. I snapped a couple of fast photos. I could easily see the driver's face in the good illumination, but I didn't recognize him. He parked on the opposite side of the lot and started walking towards my house. I struggled to calm my anger while sitting still. I connected to the coffee shop's Wi-Fi and checked the surveillance cameras. I watched him enter and kiss my wife passionately. My blood froze in my veins, and I could hardly restrain the urge to attack him. I sat and tried to eavesdrop on their conversation. "Hi, baby. I've missed you all day," he said, kissing her again. She mentioned sending the children to her parents for the night, giving them the house until the next morning. She prudently sent the children away. I saw him start to undress my wife in our living room. She quickly followed suit, and within minutes they were both naked. She invited him to continue in the bedroom and disappeared from the camera's view. He followed her, their laughter echoing through the house. Their discarded clothes were strewn on the floor. Hurriedly, I got out of the car and headed to the house. The front door was left unlocked, a clear sign they were in a rush. This made my task easier. I reached into his trousers and found his wallet, which contained all the necessary information. With the wallet in hand, I went to my home office on the second floor, away from the bedroom so I wouldn't be overheard. I turned on the computer, printer, and scanner, waiting for them to boot up. When I was prepared, I began scanning Stephen Bannister's wallet to create duplicates of his driver's license and other documentation. I quickly put the wallet back where it belonged, took pictures of the garments on the ground, and turned the cameras into video mode. I went up the steps and kept recording silently. My stomach turned when I heard the faint sounds of their passionate kissing at the top step. I caught a glimpse of our bedroom door wide open. They believed the house was deserted, although this was obviously untrue. I moved slowly toward the bedroom, the shouts inside growing louder as I went. I was standing in the doorway when I noticed Steve sleeping on our shared bed, my wife on top of him, both deeply in love. They were so absorbed in their actions that I managed to enter the room unnoticed. Knowing the hidden cameras were of low quality, I wanted to capture this moment in high resolution. I recorded a few minutes of their closeness before deciding I had seen enough. The urge to grab a baseball bat and confront Steve crossed my mind again, but wise advice pierced through my anger. Hurriedly, I left the room, trying not to make any impulsive decisions. As I drove back to the hotel, my thoughts were in turmoil, and my anger reached a boiling point. I couldn't recall ever being so furious, and it was starting to concern me. I called Frank and shared all the information I had gathered, including my actions. He praised my efforts, but noted the risks involved in breaking into the house. Apologizing once again, he offered his assistance in any way he could. Frank was a reliable friend, one I could always turn to. Now I needed to talk to someone. I also wanted to meet Mark and ask him for a favor. "Could you check if he's available for a meeting this weekend?" I asked Frank. "Of course I will," Frank replied. "Mark said he's ready to help you." After speaking with Frank, I attempted to get some rest, but sleep eluded me despite my exhaustion. Eventually, I decided to go for my usual morning run to clear my head and release my pent-up frustration. Unfortunately, the run didn't offer much relief, so I opted for a shower and a nap to compensate for the lack of sleep the previous night. After returning the rented car to the airport, I retrieved my car and immediately drove to the office to speak with Hal. It was crucial for me to discuss reducing travel for work. Entering Hal's office and closing the door behind me, I asked, "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course, Logan. Is everything okay?" Hal inquired. "My wife urges me to reduce the number of work trips. I really need to be home more often," I explained, looking at Hal expectantly. "You're right. Your promotion has been given the green light, so you'll be out of the office most of the time. After the upcoming trip, you may have to make 1 or 2 trips a year, but no more frequent than that." "How does that sound?" Hal responded. I stared into space, unable to digest the news. "It sounds fantastic. Thank you." I managed to reply. Noticing my concern, Hal asked, Logan, is everything okay? You haven't seemed like yourself lately? Worried, I decided to confide in him. My wife is having an affair. Last night I saw her with her lover and captured them on video. Hal stared at me in shock. Oh my God, Logan. I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. How can I help you? You gave me exactly what I needed, an excuse to stay at home and work on saving my marriage. Please don't tell anyone in the office about this. I still don't know who this guy is or if he has any connections here, I pleaded. Okay, I won't say a word, Hal assured me. Do you really think someone from our team is behind this? Now I feel insecure about everything. If I need a break, I'll ask you to cover for me. I want my wife to believe that I'm still on a business trip so that I can gather more evidence against her. Can you help me with this? Ian asked Hal. Of course, I can help, but what are your plans for the future? Hal inquired. I just want to gather enough evidence to prove her infidelity. I hope to save my marriage, but if that fails, I want to protect myself in a divorce. I have to be ready, I replied. Okay, just let me know when you need a day off, and we'll make it look like you're on another business trip, Hal agreed. Thanking Hal, I left his office with a feeling of slight relief. Everything was starting to make sense. Although I claimed that I was working to save my marriage, in fact, it was already over. That evening at home, I bravely looked at my children, trying to pretend that everything was fine. The delight and love overwhelmed me, and I held back tears at the thought of how a possible divorce would affect them. It troubled me to think that I required permission to see my own kids. My wife and I generally had some intimacy on Sunday evenings, but she wasn't feeling well this particular Sunday. We hadn't had any intimacy for over a month, even if this wasn't the first instance of that kind. I asked Hal for a week off so I could finish getting ready for the trip and told the office to tell anyone who contacted that I was on a routine business trip. Hal wished me luck and said he had no problem with this arrangement. I knew that my next trip would be longer than normal, and I had to break the news to my wife. Understandably, she wasn't overjoyed. I know you don't like my frequent trips, but I promise it won't be for long. Soon I'll be coming home so often that you'll get tired of seeing me, I teased. She didn't find it funny and just sighed. Call me as soon as you arrive, she said calmly. With these words, our marriage came to an end. I left quickly, not wanting to say something I would regret later, and headed to the airport. The meetings with the clients went smoothly, and the deal was concluded ahead of schedule, which allowed me to return home earlier. I checked the cameras for a week, but he never returned to the house. However, I caught a glimpse of her talking on her secret cell phone. I listened to her conversation, realizing that this was the opportunity I had been waiting for, despite the pain of hearing her plans. When I arrived at the office, I found that the items I had bought were already waiting for me. Knowing my wife's schedule, I strategically positioned one of the items so she could not easily stumble upon it. Given her predictable daily routine at the gym, I knew exactly when and where to place the item so it wouldn't catch her eye. Armed with spare car keys, I tried to carry out my plan without unnecessary hassle. Later, I decided to check on Stephen in his apartment. When I noticed his car in the garage, I concluded he was at home and began to discreetly monitor his location with a camera. I was incredibly lucky when I saw him through the sliding doors and discovered he was not alone. He was accompanied by another woman, and it was obvious they had a deep romantic relationship, expressing love with kisses and gentle touches. I secretly recorded their intimate moments, and it felt like a dream come true. When they left together, I decided to follow them from a safe distance. They made a lunch stop, which provided me the ideal chance to covertly attach anything to his car. I had to be careful not to let anyone notice, so it was a hazardous move, but I did it without raising any red flags. The most difficult thing for me to do now was to wait. Mark gave me a call and told me about a friend I was meant to meet. To avoid being discovered in public because I was involved in some illicit activity, we made the decision to meet in my hotel room. When they got to my room, Mark gave me the name of Joe, a computer hacker who could assist me in completing my mission. Both of them gave a nod of assent. Over the next hour, I told the whole story about my wife's infidelity and the man she was involved with. Then I talked about my plan of revenge against the idiot who offended me, expressing the wish that it would be a long ordeal. As part of my plan, I revealed copies of the documents I took from Stephen's wallet. What you're asking for is risky and could land me in jail for a significant period if I get caught, Joe warned. And what do I get from it? Joe asked. After a moment's thought, I suggested, how do you like $7,000 in cash? Joe quickly agreed, insisting on receiving half in advance and the rest at the end of the assignment. Okay, that's fine with me, I agreed. To get access to his computer, we need to get inside the apartment. I also want to find additional evidence against my wife. After getting information about Stephen, Joe was able to use my laptop to study his latest purchases. The most notable were 2 air tickets to Las Vegas and a 4-night hotel reservation. This gave us the idea to plan a break-in of his apartment. Joe asked if there was an alarm system in the apartment, to which I admitted that I wasn't sure. He agreed to check the situation and report back to me. He mentioned that if an alarm system was installed in the house, he would have to charge more for helping us enter. I agreed to pay him more, but only if there were good reasons for such an increase. It looked like my wife was getting ready to leave with him, and meeting this jerk was supposed to be her last. I looked at my iPad to see if the tracking gadgets they had put in their automobiles were operational. With the use of these gadgets, I was able to locate them using a tablet or smartphone. Furthermore, upon reviewing the home security footage, I observed that my spouse had brought along a compact carry-on suitcase for the journey. I observed their activities from an opulent hotel room on the scheduled day. Joe confirmed our afternoon rendezvous when I gave him a call. Although he did not see any overt alarm systems, he cautioned us should move cautiously forward. When we met at Stephen's house, we thought out a plan to infiltrate. Joe, who learned this skill in prison, could pick locks. The dim evening light provided us with cover. Joe quickly knelt at the front door of Stephen's apartment and fumbled with the locks for almost a minute before successfully opening the door. We hurried inside, carefully checking for alarms before we found Stephen's computer. Fortunately, it was easily accessible, and Joe began to complete the task. Wait, I interjected, taking out my phone to record a video in the room. I want to make sure that we leave everything exactly as we found it. Joe agreed, nodding his approval of this precaution. If he doesn't see anything unusual, he won't suspect that anyone was here and will have more time to carry out our plan to deceive him. I agree. Let me use my magic, Joe said. Why don't you look around and search for evidence that could incriminate him? While exploring his house, I looked for any clues about his activities. After looking through the mail, I found bank statements, credit card accounts, and various other accounts, as well as regular junk mail. When I entered his bedroom, I couldn't help but notice how spotlessly clean and well-furnished the apartment was. Everything looked luxurious and expensive. I heard Joe exclaim, "I deserve it." I returned to the living room without any problems. I found that he often pays bills over the internet. In addition, I found his checks and additional credit cards that I was hoping to find. I have a card reader that can take all the data from the magnetic stripe on his credit cards. With this information, I can create duplicates of his cards, which will allow anyone with a copy to make purchases online. His cards can be easily emptied within a few hours. Joe grinned. Can you empty his bank account? I asked. No problem, he replied. I'll do it from this computer to make it look more legitimate. If the bank calls to confirm the transaction, will they need a password? Not usually, but they can ask for his social security number, which you have. I took it from Stephen's wallet. Come on, do what you need to do. But let's wait for the right moment to wreak havoc on this idiot. Let's empty his bank account now, and when he gets back from Las Vegas, we'll mess with his credit cards, I suggested. I like this idea. A little surprise for his return, Joe said, already looking forward to it. Just make sure it can't be traced back to us in any way. It should go without saying, of course. I'm cautious because I don't want to be caught again. Why are we wearing these latex gloves, do you think? Joe extended his arm to reveal the blue glove he was donning. I looked through his bedroom again and again, but nothing caught my eye until I opened the closet's rear. I discovered a shoebox full of VHS discs bearing the names of women inside. I placed the box on his bed and went to work organizing them. I didn't pay any attention to any of the names until I saw Jen's. What was the reason behind this guy secretly filming them together? You have to come and see this. Curious, I insisted, and he trailed behind me into another room. What did you find? Joe queried. It appears that this man is engaged in blackmail. He possesses multiple videos showing ladies having personal interactions with Stephen. Stephen is hidden, but the faces of the women are apparent. Based on certain communications, it appears that he is trying to extract money from them. In my interpretation, he goes after married women who have kids, threatens to expose them, and then uses these tapes as blackmail. Considering that these tapes might be used against them in court, none of them wants to get divorced. The retaliation is harsh, even though he appears like a nice guy. Do you think he saved all the videos on his hard drive? Joe asked. I'm not sure, but I found some VCRs in his closet, so I think these are the only copies he has. As soon as you're done, don't forget to completely erase his hard drive so that no trace remains. Have you come across a backup disc? Joe queried. No, but that does not imply that he is without one. I'll search around and maybe locate it. I gathered all the DVDs when I got back to the bedroom and put them in a backpack I found in the closet. I looked around the room and couldn't find any more proof, so I went back to see how Joe was doing. You were right. I found his backup disc. Great. Make a full backup, erase the disc on his laptop, and we'll take his backup disc with us. But if we do that, he'll know someone was here. I realize, but it's required. He will eventually lose his source of income due to the exposure of his blackmail plot, and he will go bankrupt. Furthermore, I want to reassure these women that they don't have to fear him anymore. All of these women's emails should be printed out. I may set up an email account to inform them that they are no longer obliged to pay this repulsive man. Since you're paying me, I can create an email account from his computer if you want. Let's get on with it, I said. When we finished, I took another look around the neighborhood. Then we closed up and quickly left. Returning to the car, I handed Joe an envelope with the remaining money owed to him. Thanks for the help, I said gratefully. I'll call you when I'm ready to shell out all the money from his credit cards and really destroy this guy. Joe nodded in agreement, and we shook hands with pleasure. He assured me before leaving. I went back to the hotel to carry out the rest of my plan. I started by giving my family a call to see how my kids were doing. Upon answering the phone, my father-in-law gave me a kind greeting. Dad, this is Logan, I introduced myself. I was really curious about the children's well-being. I hope you and Mom aren't having too much trouble with them. They're both tiny angels, Logan. I hope Jamie is having a great weekend with her gals. Have you spoken with her lately? He inquired. No, not yet. I was going to make the next call. I just wanted to make sure the girls weren't causing any problems. They like staying with their grandparents, I explained. After talking to Jamie's father, it turned out he had no idea she was in Las Vegas with another man. I called her home first, knowing she wouldn't be there, and left a message. After waiting an hour with no answer, I called her cell phone again. She didn't reply, so I left a message expressing my concern. I mentioned that I had tried calling her at home and on her mobile, asking her to call me back to let me know she was okay. I also said that if I didn't hear back within an hour, I would contact her parents. 10 minutes later, my phone rang, and to my big surprise, it was Jamie. I tried calling home, but you didn't answer the phone. Everything is fine. I was walking with my friends and then took the girls to their parents. I just needed a break from staying at home, she explained. When we were talking, she seemed a little tense. I can sympathize with you. I'll be back home in a week. Maybe we could go out together. What do you say? I suggested. Oh, that sounds good, she replied uncertainly. Jamie, is everything okay? You don't seem excited about dating your own husband, I teased her, trying to make her a little nervous. Oh, no, I'm just tired. I feel like going to bed early tonight, she replied. Sure, baby. Go get some rest. Sweet dreams. I love you, I said before we hung up. Despite my mounting anger, I forced myself to remain calm. I didn't sleep well again, so I went for a morning run. Back in the room, I took a refreshing shower, then called the office to ensure everything was going smoothly, which it was. Then there was a terrible call that all parents fear. Rebecca was injured at school and had to be rushed to the hospital. At that moment, nothing was more important to me than my child's well-being. The school had called me at home first, but when no one answered, they tried contacting me at work. A colleague from my office gave me the message. I immediately called the school back and found out Rebecca had broken her arm and was now in the emergency room. Without hesitation, I rushed out the door and headed straight to the hospital. When I arrived, I dialed Jamie's number, and when she didn't answer, I left a voice message threatening to call a divorce lawyer if she didn't return my call within 10 minutes. Jamie eventually called an hour later, but I didn't answer. I was sitting with my kid, who was grieving for her mother and had a cast on her arm, and I was at a loss for words to console her. She eventually became quiet, so I took her to see her grandparents. When my phone rang once more, I hung up. I cleaned up after that and scheduled a meeting with a respectable divorce attorney for the following day. It was then that Jamie called once more. I answered the phone. "Thank you for taking the time to contact me. How's Stephen doing? Did you manage to play blackjack? After you get home, the girls and I will move out. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer. I have incriminating videos of you and Stephen together, and I think it won't be difficult for me to get full custody of the children." She was saying, "Oh God, please, Logan, don't do this." She started crying. "It appears that you were unaware that your child was in the hospital, wailing for her mother while you were in Las Vegas. Regretfully, her mother's involvement with her lover was excessive. Perhaps you can make a fresh start and have the life you've always desired with Stephen. Though I'm sure Stephen can have more children for you, it's unfortunate that your two girls won't be joining you. You're still young. It is my genuine wish that you and Stephen would be happy together." She firmly stated, "But Logan, it's you I love and want." "I've had enough of talking," I continued. I took Rebecca and Amy home, helped them pack their things, and put them in their room next to mine. After that, I contacted Jamie's father to inform him about the situation at school and explain that we wouldn't be living at home until some issues were resolved. "Logan, what is happening? Is there something wrong with Jamie?" he inquired. "We're having some problems. I advise you to speak with Jamie personally. The daughters will remain with me in the interim to guarantee their security and well-being." Despite his lack of understanding, he sent us his best wishes and hoped that we might find solutions to our issues. Subsequently, I contacted my attorney and requested that he serve my wife with a subpoena. I contacted Joe first and told him to exact revenge on the person who had insulted me. I wanted him to ruin his credit by opening additional cards and using them all up, as well as to destroy his bank accounts and credit cards. I angrily exclaimed, "I want him to get into debt." Joe grinned and replied, "With pleasure, dude. If you need to do anything else with this bastard, don't hesitate to call me. I won't take any money from you." Later, Jamie called me that evening. I ignored the call at first, but her text message made me change my mind. "I'm in trouble. Please call," it said. When I called back, she was in tears. "If your tears are causing problems, then I'm not interested," I began. But then she explained that Stephen was blackmailing her. "He's threatening to share the Vegas video if I don't do what he says," she said quickly. "Your dream come true is a liar," I said. "Now go get over it," and hung up. I knew this day would come, but Jamie had to experience the fallout directly. Her refuges were her marriage and her home, but she chose to leave them behind to pursue her own interests, and now she must answer for her actions. I still needed to find Jamie a charming prince, even if I was happy to watch her suffer. I spoke with Joe for that reason. Later, knowing that it would take several days to obtain the required paperwork for Jamie, I called my lawyer. I intended to move my money offshore in the interim. I didn't mean to give Jamie something she didn't deserve. It's just my money. "Are you sure about this?" my lawyer asked. "Yes, I think I'm done. Besides, I need to talk to you about something else." "The plan is a little different." I said, "Let's meet at 5. We later met at a bar where we had a lengthy, nearly 2-hour talk. After shaking hands, I gave him a substantial envelope. Jamie contacted me several times over the next 3 days, but I didn't answer because I wanted her to experience the anguish. I finally received the call I had been waiting for on Friday night. The call was by video. I discovered a man strapped to a chair when I picked up the phone. There was a background voice that said, "My friend has a message for you." With effort, the man lifted his head and glanced at the television. "Hi, Stephen. It looks like you had a good time in Tijuana. I understand traveling in a confined space can be exhausting, but I'm sure fatigue is the least of your worries right now. It will also help you hide from the bank to which you owe a significant amount of money. Are you familiar with Santiago? He is known as El Po. He makes a stew, a unique stew. You'll find out soon enough. I could easily sue you for alienation of affection and maybe get money from you, but it would take too long, and I don't want to waste my time on you or my stupid wife. So I guess this is goodbye. Mr. Lopez, you can take him away." The last time I saw Stephen, there was fear in his eyes. It was a good investment for me. He disappeared without a trace, and no one bothered to inquire about his whereabouts. 8 months later, I was finally released from marriage and given custody of my daughters. I was allowed to keep the house until my daughters turned 20. We may then sell it and divide the proceeds after that. There was no child support or alimony. She could still go out with the girls, even though I didn't want anything to do with Jamie. I would take them to her place and be out of there in no time. After a year, Amy's school teacher Lisa and I began dating. Amy appeared to relish having her around. I didn't want to rush marriage, so I hadn't given it much thought. For her part, Jamie's situation was not good. She ended up getting into enormous debts that I was completely unaware of. She sold her body and love to pay off the debt she incurred from obtaining money from powerful individuals.